Imagine this. You're sitting alone, wondering if breaking your silence would heal something or destroy what little is left. Today, we're talking about a difficult and emotional subject. When, if ever, you should break your no contact with a woman. Not because you're lonely, not because you're bored, not because the silence feels heavy, but only if something real has changed. Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you're here because this topic has saved many men from breaking down their own progress. As a therapist, I've watched countless men crawl out of heartbreak with bruised confidence and scars they never imagined they would carry. I've also seen the exact moment some of them reached out too soon and walked right back into the same pain. I would never share their names, but I can share what I've witnessed. And sometimes it's not romantic and it's not poetic. It's human. No contact isn't a game. It isn't a trick to manipulate someone. It's oxygen. It's space. It's how you stop bleeding long enough to see what went wrong in the first place. But the controversial part? Sometimes breaking no contact is the healthiest thing a man can do, and people hate hearing that. They assume silence is always strength, that speaking again means you're weak or desperate. That's not true. True strength is knowing the difference between reacting emotionally and responding intentionally. And when something changes, genuinely changes, silence may no longer serve you. So tonight, I want you to listen with your mind, not just your pride. Not every woman deserves a door back into your life, but there are rare situations when breaking your silence might be the right step. Let's talk about those moments with honesty, clarity, and experience. 1. When she takes responsibility without excuses. There's a moment in healing that is hard to describe unless you've been there. It's the moment when the person who hurt you stops defending themselves and finally acknowledges the impact of their actions. Not with anger, not with blame, not with manipulation, just honesty. In every situation I've seen as a therapist, this is the difference between a conversation that heals and a conversation that destroys. When you're in no contact, what you're really doing is giving space for perspective. Silence forces both people to confront themselves without the distraction of arguments or comfort. If a woman reaches out and she is still blaming you, still rewriting history, still minimizing what happened, then nothing has changed. But when she takes responsibility without excuses, something deeper is happening. It doesn't mean she's perfect. It doesn't mean everything suddenly becomes easy. But accountability is the language of maturity. I've sat with men who came into my office shaking with anger, convinced they were the villain. They had been told they overreacted. They expected too much. They were dramatic. After weeks of silence, suddenly the woman reached out and said the words they should have heard long before. I was wrong. I hurt you. I understand why you walked away. That kind of honesty doesn't erase the past, but it shows respect for the pain she caused, and respect makes communication possible again. Responsibility isn't about begging. It's not about asking for another chance. A woman taking responsibility doesn't come with pressure. She's not trying to guilt you into replying. She's not demanding forgiveness. She's acknowledging that she failed you and she understands why you had to protect yourself. When that happens, silence can shift into something more honest, because the conversation becomes two adults facing the truth, not two people trying to win. But here's the part people misunderstand. Responsibility without action is nothing. If she says the right words but still behaves the same way, then nothing changed at all. But when her tone is calmer, her language is clearer, and she shows empathy instead of defensiveness, that's when a man might break his silence. Because in that moment, she isn't just asking for you back. She's showing she learned something in your absence. You don't break no contact because you're lonely. You don't break it because you miss her voice. You break it only if she shows growth, accountability, and emotional maturity. Without that, no contact is not just a boundary, it's protection. 2. When real change shows, not promises. One of the biggest mistakes men make is believing words instead of watching actions. Promises can sound beautiful. Apologies can sound sincere. But when a woman reaches out after no contact, the question isn't, what did she say? The question is, what has she actually changed? Because every therapist sees the same pattern. Emotional words, emotional promises, and then everything goes right back to the pain that caused the breakup in the first place. Real change isn't emotional, it's behavioral. If she reaches out and everything sounds poetic, emotional, and dramatic, but nothing in her actions is different, then she wants comfort, not growth. Men need to understand the psychology behind this. During no contact, you're healing, but she is thinking too. Some women reach out because they feel lonely, not because they've changed. Some reach out because they miss the attention. Some reach out because someone else disappointed them. And some reach out because the silence made them see who you were in ways they didn't notice before. The only way you can tell the difference is by looking for change, not listening for it. When real change happens, it won't feel confusing. Her communication becomes calmer, clearer, and more direct. She doesn't dodge responsibility. She doesn't argue about the past. She doesn't try to flip the blame back on you. She starts asking what you need, not what she wants. She respects your boundaries. She gives you space to speak without attacking, interrupting, or twisting your words. That shift is huge. When a woman has grown, the conversation feels safer, and that security is worth more than any apology. I've watched men sit in my office wondering why they fell for the same cycle again. They heard tears, promises, emotional confessions, and then within days, the old patterns returned. That's because they responded to emotion, not transformation. Real change takes time. You'll notice it in the stability of her words, the calmness in her delivery, and the patience she shows. She won't rush you. She won't pressure you. She won't demand a decision. Growth makes people gentle. Men often think they have to respond the moment she reaches out, but you don't. If she's truly changed, she won't disappear just because you took time to think. She'll wait because maturity knows patience. But if her change exists only in her sentences, she'll become angry, emotional, or defensive as soon as you don't give her what she wants. That's how you know nothing is different. Breaking no contact should never be based on the comfort of her voice or the memory of the good moments. It should be based on whether she has done the inner work. If the same behavior returns after the conversation, then the silence wasn't broken. It was wasted. Real change is quiet, steady, and consistent. If you can't see it, you don't owe a reply. 3. When you're emotionally healed, not hurting. No contact isn't just about silence, it's about recovery. Most men don't realize this until they break it too soon. There is a huge difference between reaching out because you're healed and reaching out because you're still bleeding. When your emotions are raw, every message feels heavier, every word feels sharper, and every conversation can pull you right back into the pain you escaped from. That's why emotional healing matters more than timing, more than loneliness, and more than missing her. When you're still hurting, you read her texts through pain. You respond defensively. You feel anxious, hopeful, scared, angry, all at the same time. That's not reconciliation. That's trauma talking. I've seen men who thought they were strong enough to handle a simple conversation. They wanted closure. They wanted clarity, or they just wanted to hear her voice. The moment she replied, every wound opened again. Suddenly they were arguing, explaining themselves, apologizing for things they didn't do, or begging for understanding they deserved in the first place. Pain makes you vulnerable to the same patterns that destroyed you. Emotional healing means you can talk without falling apart. You can listen without taking every word personally. You can hear her explanation and still keep your self-respect. When you're healed, you're not driven by fear of losing her. You're driven by clarity about yourself. That's powerful. Healing means you're not breaking no contact because you feel empty, but because you feel grounded. You're not reacting. You're choosing. The truth is, no contact gives you time to rebuild your life. You sleep better, you think clearly, you reconnect with yourself. Your world stops revolving around what she feels or what she wants. You start remembering who you were before the relationship drained you. And when a healed man speaks, his words carry strength. He doesn't chase. He doesn't prove. He doesn't negotiate for love. He simply communicates. If you're still checking your phone, replaying old conversations, imagining what you'll say, or worrying about her reaction, you're not healed yet. You're waiting. Healing is when you could reply, but you don't feel like your heart is depending on her response. Healing is when you're okay with losing her if that's what's best for your peace. Healing is when you can walk away after the conversation and not fall back into the same emotional prison. Breaking no contact should never be an escape from loneliness. It should be a decision you make from a place of strength. If you're still hurting, the silence is protecting you. But when you can face her voice, her emotions, and her words without losing yourself, that's when a conversation becomes possible. Not to fill a void, but to see the truth with a steady heart instead of a broken one. 4. When communication feels safe again. There's a moment in every relationship where communication either becomes a weapon or a bridge. And when a man chooses no contact, it's usually because every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Words turned into arguments, misunderstandings turned into accusations, and silence became the only place where his heart wasn't under attack. So if you ever consider breaking no contact, the first question isn't, "Does she miss me?" It's, "Is communication safe again?" I remember a former client who spent months trying to communicate with his partner, but every discussion turned into blame, defensiveness, or emotional punishment. He wasn't perfect, but he was exhausted. Every time he tried to express how he felt, she treated him like he was wrong for speaking. Eventually, he went no contact, not to hurt her, but to stop hurting himself. When she reached out weeks later, she sounded different, not emotional, not angry, not demanding, calm, soft, clear. She didn't ask why he disappeared. She didn't accuse him of abandoning her. She asked if he was open to a respectful conversation, and she meant it. When communication feels safe, you notice it immediately. There's patience instead of pressure, questions instead of accusations, listening instead of interrupting. A woman who has grown doesn't come back fighting. She comes back understanding. She doesn't force you to respond instantly. She doesn't guilt you. She gives space for honesty. Safe communication means you can express a boundary without fear it will start a war. You can say, "I was hurt," without hearing, "You're too sensitive." You can explain your needs without being shamed for having them. A lot of men don't realize this, but emotional safety is not a luxury. It's a requirement. If her words used to make you feel small, unseen, or disrespected, then breaking no contact too soon puts you right back in the same emotional cage. With that former client, the first conversation they had after weeks of silence didn't solve everything, but it was the first time they both spoke instead of fought. No shouting, no sarcasm, no manipulation. He told her how he felt. She listened. She apologized. She didn't defend herself. She didn't twist his words. That's what safe communication looks like. Two people talking to heal, not to win. Breaking no contact is never about returning to the past. It's about seeing whether a healthier version of communication is even possible. If talking to her still feels like a threat, a test, or a trap, then silence is still your protection. But if conversation feels like clarity instead of chaos, that might be a sign things have changed. You can't rebuild anything without safety, not trust, not respect, not love. So before you break that silence, ask yourself, does her voice bring peace, or does it reopen wounds? The answer to that question tells you more than any apology ever will. 5. When her actions match her words. A lot of relationships fall apart because words were loud, but actions were silent. You heard promises like, "I'll do better," "I'll change," or "I didn't mean to hurt you." They sounded sincere in the moment, but over time, nothing changed. The same patterns returned, the same arguments repeated, and the same pain showed up again and again. This is where many men get caught. They hear what they want to believe instead of paying attention to what's real. When you break no contact, it should only happen when her actions finally align with what she says, not just for a day, but consistently. The wrong thing to tell her is how much you missed her, how empty everything felt without her, or how badly you want things to go back to how they were. Those emotions are real, but if you express them first, you give the relationship power over your feelings instead of balance. I watched men walk into conversations full of hope, telling her they would do anything to fix things. The woman responded with emotion, but because nothing was fundamentally different, those men stepped right back into the same pain. When you come in emotionally exposed and she comes in unchanged, you are negotiating from weakness. The right thing to tell her is calm, firm, and honest. You don't need to beg, blame, or argue. If she reaches out and her actions truly look different, your words should reflect clarity, not desperation. You can tell her, I'm willing to talk, but only if we're both committed to healthier behavior. You can say, I'm open to a conversation, but I'm not returning to the same patterns. This shows strength. It shows that you value yourself, not just the relationship. Actions speak in ways apologizing never will. If she used to ignore your feelings, and now she listens without interrupting, that's action. If she dismissed your emotions before, and now she validates them, that's action. If she used to manipulate, insult, or threaten to leave during arguments, and now communicates calmly and respectfully, that's action. Real change doesn't need advertising. It's visible. But if she reaches out with long emotional messages and zero behavioral difference, then nothing has changed. If she apologizes but tries to rush you, pressure you, or guilt you, that's not healing. That's control. If she's still defensive, still blaming you, still rewriting history, then silence still protects you. Breaking no contact in that environment only puts the same pain back into your hands. The right thing to tell her is what you need, not what you fear losing. Respect, honesty, consistency, peace, these are the standards that create healthy love. If she shows those things through action, then responding becomes a choice, not a risk. If not, silence remains the smartest sentence you'll ever speak. 6. When you both understand what went wrong. One of the most painful parts of a broken relationship is realizing that two people can live through the same experience, but walk away with two completely different stories. She has her version, you have yours. And when neither person understands the other, every conversation turns into a battle. That's why no contact exists, because stepping back is sometimes the only way to finally see what you couldn't see while you were in the middle of it. But breaking that silence should only happen when both of you genuinely understand what went wrong, not just how it felt. A lot of relationships end with blame instead of truth. You might think she didn't care, and she might think you gave up. You might believe you weren't heard, while she believes you never explained yourself. When the emotions are high, nobody listens. Hurt makes people defensive. Pride makes them stubborn, but time creates clarity. And when a woman reaches out not to argue, but to understand, really understand, that's different. That's maturity speaking instead of emotion. It becomes engaging, even surprising when she reaches out and instead of saying, "Why did you disappear?" she asks, "Can we talk about what went wrong and why it hurt us both?" When she stops focusing on who was right and starts focusing on what was broken, something shifts. She's not trying to win. She's trying to grow. And if you've spent your no contact period reflecting, you might realize you had things to learn too. No relationship ends because of one person. Even if she caused most of the damage, you walked through it, ignored warning signs, or tried to fix things alone. Understanding that makes the conversation honest instead of emotional. When two people finally see the real problem, the conversation is calmer. You can say, "I felt unheard," and she doesn't fight you. She replies, "I didn't know my actions made you feel that way, but I can see it now." She might say, "I was reacting from insecurity," instead of accusing you of leaving her behind. And you may find yourself acknowledging your own mistakes, not to prove you're wrong, but because growth turns shame into wisdom. Understanding what went wrong doesn't mean the relationship will automatically work again. It just means the two of you are no longer talking from pain. You're talking from awareness. If she just wants to forget the past, that's a problem. If she wants to pretend nothing happened, that's a danger. But if she wants to learn from it, not rewrite it, then silence has done its job. Breaking no contact should never be about missing each other. Missing someone is easy. Understanding them is rare. The real sign that communication is safe again is when both of you can talk about the past without fighting over who was the villain. Two people who understand what went wrong have a chance to fix what's ahead. Two people who don't will repeat every wound all over again. 7. When moving forward is healthier than staying silent. Silence can protect you, but there comes a moment when silence stops being healing and starts becoming a cage. No contact is powerful, but it's not meant to last forever. It's meant to help you breathe again, think clearly again, and see life without emotional fog. But if weeks or months pass and you realize you're not avoiding her out of pain anymore, you're avoiding her out of habit, then it might be time to ask yourself a hard question. Is staying silent actually helping you grow, or is it just keeping you stuck? Sometimes men stay in no contact not because they're healing, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of opening up, afraid that talking will bring back emotions they spent so long suppressing. But healing doesn't mean hiding from life. Healing means being strong enough to face it differently. If breaking no contact feels like a choice, not a weakness, that's a sign of growth. I've sat with men who healed so much during no contact that they didn't even recognize the person they used to be. They got their confidence back. They understood their value. They discovered that their world didn't revolve around one relationship anymore. And from that place of strength, they reached out. Not to restart something painful and not to beg for someone back, but to see if something new and healthier was possible. Because when silence has done all it can do, staying in it becomes another form of running away. But here's the important part. Moving forward doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It means you are strong enough to talk without losing yourself. You can have a conversation without needing a result. You can hear her voice without feeling broken. When you've reached that level of emotional maturity, breaking no contact isn't a risk. It's clarity. And sometimes, after all the reflection, all the space, and all the healing, you may realize that moving forward means closure, not reconciliation. You may talk, listen, and walk away knowing the story is finally over. That's still progress. That's still strength. Silence protected you when you were vulnerable. Communication will guide you now that you're stronger. What makes this moment powerful is that your decision is based on peace, not pain. If responding feels like a step toward growth, whether that growth leads to reconnection or goodbye, then breaking no contact is a mature, intentional choice. If silence keeps you frozen, communication might free you. So ask yourself, is your silence helping you heal or helping you hide? When the answer becomes clear, so does your next move. Because in the end, the goal is not to stay silent forever. The goal is to become strong enough that whatever comes next, you remain whole. No contact is not a game, a punishment, or a trick. It's a way to protect your heart long enough to see life clearly. But silence is only useful when it leads to growth, clarity, and self-respect. If she has changed, if you have healed, and if communication finally feels safe, breaking no contact can be a mature step, not a desperate one. If those things aren't present, silence remains your shield. The power is not in staying silent forever, but in knowing exactly why you respond and what you're walking back into. Your peace should always be the priority.